Hi, I'm Sebastian. I'm going to start with an awkward confession. When I planned this talk, I thought I had 15 minutes, and then I came here and was told I have 5. So we will have to kick out something, and the one thing that we will kick out is a small demo of React that we just talked about, because I thought maybe it could be fun to show you the most simple agent that you can build by literally just like prompting a simple GPT very nicely, and then you can go through that sort of agentic loop of tool calling while making you, the human, the tool. So rather than calling a tool, it just asks you and you provide the answer. And that's very nice because you can sort of like back and forth between the agent and really understand how does that loop actually work. If there's interest and we have time in the end, we can go through that. Otherwise, I'm going to kick it out. Instead, I'll talk about 2 things today. One is I will show you a demo of how you can use, how you use LangChainJS to look at reasoning traces that come out of the newer models like GPT-5, Grok doesn't do reasoning, Gemini, and those models, like how you get those models to give you not just the output, but also the reasoning trace. And then the other part that I will do is I'll show you the code behind that. So first the demo, then the code, then questions, and if there's interest, we can look at React as well. Sound good? Wonderful. All right. Yes. I can skip that. Demo first. Right. Let's see if I have internet. Right. This is a very simple app that I've been putting together over the last 2 weeks. It's essentially sort of a custom chat GPT, if you want to think of it like that. The difference is that it actually connects to not just GPT or Gemini. It connects to GPT, Gemini, Grok, Anthropic, etc. Doesn't do open router. I just chose to do the individual providers manually. And the other cool thing is it completely runs in your browser, so there's no backend. So all the messages are stored locally, which is nice because then if multiple people use it, you don't need to worry about data going anywhere. Also, the other nice thing is if you go through the API, then you're basically by default opted out from training other people's models. So even if you have something that's more sensitive, you can throw it in there, and you don't need to worry of like, can I actually share this with the big LLM providers? Right. So if I do this and I do like, I am attending a AI Tinkerers meetup, I would like to post on LinkedIn about it. Can you give me 3 hooks? Something like this, right? So the idea for this is that this is nice. Let's ignore the stuff at the top, but you have probably all done this at some point in time. It just gives you 3 ideas, and then you can iterate through that. Now, the cool thing about this app is that I can press this sort of like brainstorm, multiple model, whatever button, and then it sends the same prompt to the other models, because that ends up being more creative than asking for like 10 prompts from one model. I can ask for like 5 prompts from each model, try 4 different models, get 20 responses. And because different LLM providers use different data sets, I'll get vastly different responses. And that's very cool, right? And then I get these responses. And the thing I want to show you today is this little button up here, the thoughts. Because if I prompt like Claude 4 Sonnet with thinking enabled, or if I prompt GPT-5 or GPT Pro, Gemini 2.5 Pro, I get the thinking piece. Is this big enough? Can you actually read what's on the screen? Or right. The exact words don't really matter. The point is more like it does some reasoning before it spits out something. That is usually good if you're doing something that's more complex, but from a user experience perspective, this can be very bad, because if you're not showing that, what's happening, people have complained about that with the GPT-5 series. You prompt something and it does nothing for the user for like 10 seconds, and then it starts giving the output. But what's actually happening is it does something very quickly. It's just thinking. And if your app doesn't show the thinking, then it looks like your app just doesn't do anything for a couple of seconds. And that thinking can last for quite a while, right? And that's the piece that I want to talk about a bit, and how do you do that in LangChain, right? I will now jump over straight into the code of it. I think here I need to zoom in a bit, or is this big enough? Can you guys see? Right? So the piece that the part where it connects to the app is not super important for understanding, but it's nice for context to know, which is this part where we are streaming the response of the model. And the reason we're streaming it is, again, user experience. If you're running it in like a sort of an LLM workflow in the backend, nobody cares. It can take a couple of seconds, that's fine. But if it's streaming, you want the response within 200 milliseconds. It doesn't need to be the full answer, but it needs to show that it's doing something, right? So we want to stream it incrementally. And this is essentially what we're doing. We're waiting, and we're iterating, we're generating an iterate, we're creating an iterator. Then we stream over the chunks, and if the chunk contains a thinking piece, we'll add it to the thought. If the chunk contains normal text, like the response, we add it to the response. And that one is a class that I provided, and this one wraps the actual LLM component of LangChainJS, and that's what's happening here. So this is an interface to, there we are. So this is the streaming, this is a streaming class that wraps LangChain, and LangChain is down here. So we're creating a new chat model, and then we are iterating over the individual pieces, and we get the response from LangChain. That's sort of the plumbing that happens. So we have the app, it calls some custom wrapper layer, the wrapper layer calls LangChain. And then that's what's interesting is like what happens within LangChain. And if we go to Anthropic, then you see when you initialize, the first piece I should add here is that LangChain is a bit iffy, I've noticed, when it comes to actually working with multiple models. As long as you work with one, you get a relatively smooth experience. Once you add a second one in parallel, you realize that that model has a completely different interface. And I find it very fascinating that you try to provide sort of a wrapper layer around around like multiple libraries and unify the stack, and then you give everyone a different interface, which breaks your mental model. So that is a thing to keep in mind when you work with LangChain, that you might have to end up doing different things for different models. So the way you initialize a Anthropic model is by calling new chat Anthropic. The way you initialize OpenAI is you call new chat OpenAI. And for Google, you actually cannot initialize it the normal way. They have a wrapper, but they actually use an outdated API from Google under the hood. So you actually don't get any thinking. So instead, you need to write your own custom model in order to get the thinking out of it. And XAI doesn't have any SDK. You just use the normal OpenAI SDK and point it to Anthropic, to Grok. Right, so that's the start. That's the first piece. And then what you need to pass in is this. For Anthropic specifically, you need to pass in this thinking piece, and that enables thinking. So if you prompt Claude 4, by default, you will not get any thinking. It will just route to the non-thinking model. You get a response very quickly. If you pass in thinking, and you pass type thinking enabled, and then you specify how many tokens you want to spend on thinking, then you will get a thinking response. For OpenAI, it looks similar. You pass in something called reasoning, not thinking. And there you can choose what type of summaries you want back for your reasoning, and you can choose how much effort you want to put on thinking. So rather than specifying, I want to have this many tokens on thinking, I need to specify minimal, low, or high, and then that tells the AI how much it should be reason on average. My guess is that they just have 3 different versions of the model fine-tuned to different levels of thinking, and then they route it. My guess, I don't know. But yeah, so that's the piece on OpenAI. On Google, as I said, LangChain doesn't help you. You need to implement it yourself. So then what you do is you import the actual current Google SDK, which is called Google LLM. Where do I have it? Up here. OK, I will not search right now. But the gist is in here, you pass in the, there we are. You pass in the options, and in the options are here. You have the thinking config. Right now, Control E this. Then I do not find anything. OK, never mind. There we go. Then you pass in the thinking config, and there it's include thoughts. And then after that, you also specify thinking budget. And the weird thing about the Google API is it has a minimal number of tokens. So if you specify any number that you want, some models will suddenly throw an error because different models have different minimum budgets for thinking. Fair enough. And XAI is very simple. XAI doesn't export reasoning traces, so you're just completely out of luck. It still reasons. So there you will get the response of like just blank, and at some point it spits out an output. But it just doesn't give you any like feedback on what it is thinking about. Right? So that's how you put it all together. And then once you do that, on the other side, on the output, that is the one where I want to go back here. If once you get a streaming response, you would assume that LangChain now gets the response back, and that's happy days, right? Again, wrong. Because there are different places where you need to grab the thinking responses depending on which model you use. So for OpenAI, you have it up here in the reasoning. Where is it? Reasoning content. Where am I? Sorry, it's up here. Then the chunk additional keyword arguments reasoning, and there they set an array with a parameter called summary text, and that's how you get it out of OpenAI. Whereas out of Anthropic, you get it as part of the normal chunk message, and then they send a chunk type called thinking, which isn't actually part of the Anthropic definition. They just, in the SDK for Anthropic, they decided to create a custom chunk type, which is called thinking, and there you find it, which is not documented anywhere. So if you ever need to do that, you'll need to either know or go through the code. So I thought I should mention it because that's useful to know. And for Google, since you wrap it yourself, you decide where it lands, and I just put it into thinking and mirror what Anthropic does to get some kind of standardization. So that's how you get it in. Different types or different ways of doing it to put it in, different ways of getting it out. And then once it all comes together, you get these kind of thinking responses. All right. How am I with my 5 minutes? I'm up. Good. That's actually roughly on time then. Thank you. Now, all right. This was a bit of a running because I had a third of the time that I planned for this, but I think we're still good. I can do questions